Hi class, this is Mr. Tan, and today we are doing Finance in Hospitality, Unit 2. And we are on question 2.1. Now this is being videoed and it will be uploaded to YouTube. So if you don't want to be a part of this, then you need to leave. So I'm going to continue. So we're doing 2.1, and 2.1 says discuss, keyword here. What does discuss mean? Talk about, good. Talk about the elements of cost, selling prices, and the gross profit percentage margin. And relate it to products and services to a business in the service industry. So we know that you have given the case study assignment, and what case study are you basing this on? A restaurant. You're using, what type of restaurant are you basing it on for yours? Italian restaurant. And yourselves?
Kebab.
It's a kebab shop stroke restaurant. It's a business and it's in the service industry. So you're covering that part of the question. So you really need to discuss in approximately 450 words in relation to your restaurant, costs, selling prices, and gross profit percentage margins. So when we look at the different costs, we're actually saying to ourselves, well, what are some of the things that you feel that we might need to talk about in terms of the costs? Well, why is cost so important? Mary, why is cost so important?
Because it determines your profit. It's going to determine how much profit you can make.
Yes, exactly. And if you don't know what your costs are, how do you know what to sell your food for? And how do you know how much profit you're making? And how do you know if those selling prices for your foods are going to actually cover, depending upon the demand in your restaurant, going to cover all the costs of your business? So ultimately, your net profit is going to be dependent upon your cost of goods sold and all your administration charges, in terms of rent, electricity, gas, staff, and all the other costs associated with the business. So when we're looking at costs, I want you to really break down costs in terms of material, labour, and expenses in relation to your restaurant. So when I talk about materials, what would be some of the material costs in relation to your restaurant? Food and a drink.
Furniture.
And the furniture. Good. So these are material costs. So material costs, and in terms of the specific foods, you may break that down. So if it's a kebab, what type of ingredients might you have for the kebab? Lamb. Chicken.
Yeah.
What else would you have for the ingredients? Salads. What else? Fries. What else?
Rice.
Pita bread.
Yeah.
Yes. The tomatoes.
Wraps.
Yes, so you would have all those ingredients, which would make up the materials, and likewise you guys as well. So when you're talking about materials, give examples of what maybe one dish or what materials could consist of. Labour, what would some of the labour costs be in your restaurants? This side over here. What would some of the labour costs be?
The labour cost would be like staffing.
Staffing, yeah,
Like,
good.
For us, we have one chef, we have a porter,
Good.
a waiter, and a general manager.
So in your restaurant, you're talking about a main chef.
Yeah.
Would you have an assistant chef?
The porter assists.
Porter assists, and then you've got what as well?
One waiter.
One waiter.
And the general manager.
Okay, and a general manager. So again, the nice thing here, when we're talking about labour, you've related it to your business, and the good thing is you've given me more detail, because you've said, well, I'm going to need a chef, a porter, a waitress, a general manager, which is great. So, when you're talking about these, don't just talk about labour and say labour costs in terms of, you need to relate it to the business case scenario, so that's good. What do I mean by expenses? And can you relate it to your business?
Bills.
Bills such as?
Electricity, gas.
Electricity and gas, okay,
Yeah.
in relation to your business. Okay, good. And after you've talked about the different costs in terms of materials, labour and expenses, then I really want you to move into direct costs and indirect costs. But before you give examples of direct costs and indirect costs, you need to explain what is a direct cost and what is an indirect cost. So you need to really define that. So if you see on the lecture slides, what is a direct cost?
So say it's a direct, is an expenditure that can be attributed to a specific cost unit.
Good. So a direct cost is a cost that can be specifically attributed to that unit. So let's take an example in the restaurant. Let me take your signature dish, please, Mary. What's your signature dish?
Pomodoro pasta.
Pomodoro. And what ingredients do you have in that pomodoro pasta?
It's varied. You can have like with chicken, prawns,
Okay.
or just.
So you can have chickens, prawns, or tomatoes.
Yeah.
And then what? And you've got the pasta. Is that self-made or is it ready-made?
We make it ourselves.
So that's self-made pasta. And what ingredients do you use to make that?
Wheat.
Wheat. What else?
Nothing. Just basically what time.
With water.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you process that for a machine, don't you?
Yeah.
And you roll it and everything else. Good. So it's nice, fresh, homemade type pasta.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got what else? What other ingredients might you have with that?
A little bit of salt.
Salt.
You know, olive oil.
Olive oil. Do you use tomatoes?
For
Tomato puree?
pasta,
Yeah.
Yeah, we do for
Yeah.
pasta, but
So-
we make our own.
Yes.
We got most of the ingredients coming from Italy. Anyway,
Right, good.
because it's organic.
Do you add any onions in that?
Yeah, we do.
Adding some onions in that. So again, when you're looking at that signature dish, for example, we focus on that. We can say, well, how much is that going to cost us to make that plate for that signature dish? We know how much the prawns are going to cost. We know how much the pasta is going to cost. We know how much the wheat's going to cost. We know how much this onions are going to cost. And then you can add up all those costs, and you're going to get a direct cost. A direct cost is a cost that can be traced in full to the product or service or department that it is costed to. A direct costs are therefore directly attributed to the cost of that specific item or object. The prime cost is the total of direct material, direct labour and direct expenses. So again, explain what the direct cost is and then give some examples. So give an example as well for yours. Okay. So after you've done a direct cost, then you need to explain what indirect costs are. So what would you say indirect costs are? What would you say indirect costs are?
Which is a cost that's not directly added.
Yes.
Cost of cleaning, for example, and cleaning
Which would be
materials.
covered
Yes.
overheads and stuff
Good.
like that.
So it's a cost that in your business you can't actually relate it back to adding that part of that total cost for the restaurant in another area to your dish, to your signature dish. What was that signature dish again?
Pomodoro pasta.
Have you had it?
Of course.
Is it nice? How much did it cost?
1999.
$19.99.
Psychological price.
Okay. So £20 then.
1999.
No, that's in.
Say one thing.
Psychological prices.
Okay, so so indirect costs are costs which are not directly, and you can't relate those costs to that unit item. And some examples, as you gave, excellent, were like if the cleaner was cleaning or the porter was cleaning and he was using materials, well, there's going to be a cost for the cleaning materials, and those cleaning materials itself cannot be directly attributed towards how much should be contributed towards that signature dish that Mary's had. So, examples of indirect costs might be the cost of a supervisor, wages on a production line, cleaning materials, and building insurance for a factory, or electricity expenses. An overhead cost is that is incurred in the course of making a product, providing a service or running a department, but which cannot be traced directly back in full to the product, service, or department. Okay? So you've got loads of examples there. So explain that and give us some examples in relation to your business. Is everyone happy so far? The next thing you need to do is really, we're not talking about absorption costing or marginal costing, but you need to discuss more about fixed costs, variable costs, step costs, and service variable costs. Okay, so when we're looking at this, you know. So when we're looking at this, bear with me, and so what are fixed costs, please?
Expense that doesn't change over a period.
Good. So you'd explain that fixed costs are a cost that doesn't change over a period of time. Yeah. So someone give me some examples in relation to your business.
Could be rent.
Rent. So that rent is going to be fixed. It's not going to change from month to month, isn't it? It's going to say you would have negotiated that over a period of time until there is a rent review, and that will stay fixed for each month. Okay. What is a variable cost?
That
Cost
cost
that
that
keeps
vary,
changing.
but
Change over time. We're not part of.
Changes over time. Give me some examples of costs that change over time.
raw material,
Raw materials, such as, in relation to your business, what would the raw materials be?
Gas bill, cost
The raw materials for the food, yes?
The goods, yeah.
Yes, for the goods.
Goods.
Yeah, so, you know, your raw materials will change
Yeah.
depending upon what? Your
cooking.
demand.
Yeah.
You know, if your demand is X per week, it could change from week to week, and it could also be seasonal as well. During the holiday time, that it could vary. You know, Christmas time it could vary, but during other times like Valentine's Day or other special occasions like Mother's Day and so on and so forth, the demand could be extremely high. Yeah. Therefore, it varies depending upon the situation, time, and the demand. What do we mean by a step cost?
change.
Yes. So here we're talking about a step cost where for a period of time the costs are fixed. But once you go over a certain demand or criteria, then the fixed costs increase. So say for example you have a production line and you've got say one supervisor for every 10 people, for every 10 employees. But then your restaurant is doing so well, so you employ more people. So then you need to employ another supervisor. Once it expands over one supervisor for every 10 employees or 5 employees,